for a lot of the folks that I work with, they've probably spent quite a bit of time cutting themselves off from the larger mystery and the larger sense. And they've really just focused in on themselves and what they can create and achieve. And the more that they've gone down that road, the less happy and the less fulfilled they are. Nonetheless, the small self, the part of them is like, well, we must need more of this. We're not getting enough of this. So they double down and they go further into needing more attention or significance or status or things or whatever. And so it's a really nasty spiral that they can get into.
You are listening to The New Man, Beyond the Macho Jerk and the New Age Wimp. Your host is men's coach Tripp Lanier.
Do you struggle with spirituality? If you stay off the naughty list, does the universe give you what you want like Santa Claus? And why can spirituality feel so threatening to some people? Today, Alyson and I discuss some of the ways folks relate to the unseen, mysterious world of spirituality. We explore how this relates to our fear of uncertainty, our need for control, and why some people, including me, struggle with spirituality.
Good morning. You want to test me this morning. Is that what it is? Is there a little bit of that going?
I know you have energy to move. I'm just trying to push you to move it.
Oh. I don't know if I have energy to move. It's more like I want to get moving. Because I got... And you're dilly-dallying. That's my problem.
Okay. Well, good morning. I'm waiting on you.
Oh, my God. I'm going to press pause and smack you in the butt.
You don't want it. That might start something sexual.
Oh, goodness. Everything's sexual with you.
It is
Why
not.
can't you just see me as a whole person and not just a means?
Just an object.
Just an
for
object.
Satiate my desires.
Gosh.
All right. Well, what are we talking
morning.
about today? Good morning.
I want to talk about I want to talk about the law of attraction, and because I'm curious if you work with more women, and there just seems to be this layer of law of attraction, meaning there's the version of this. I have to watch my words here.
You do.
Because I have a real
You have
bias.
some bias. You do. Well, you could maybe you could just own your bias and get it out of the way.
I think it's bullshit. Is that a bias? Or an opinion?
You may have more.
That seems more like
more
a
to say there.
Judgment. That seems a little judgy.
You're definitely being judgy and biased, but that's okay. I think that's really important to get it out of the way.
Yeah.
Like not out of the way, but get it present.
I thought I could hide it.
No, you're not gonna hide it. There's no hiding in these.
Well, I think there's a conversation here because I wonder if I don't know if we agree on this. So this is why I wanted to ask you because there's a way that folks can approach a spiritual life, whether it's through whatever their religion is. And I don't see this as anything to do with any particular religion. I see this as, approaching spirituality as a place to get something. There's this transactional nature. If I do X and Y well or enough or right, then I get something in return. So there's like the law of attraction, folks, which is like the universe is here to give me shit, Ferraris and money and fame and the nice house or whatever. If I do X, Y, and Z, then the universe provides for me and looks out for me. Okay. There's this kind of, I get something in return. Mm-hmm. And there's also where folks can approach prayer from that place. They kneel and pray to request something from God. So it's this, I have my list of things, please do this for me. Mm-hmm. And I just find that an interesting place because I noticed that there's a pattern where this can lead to, ultimately, if we don't get what we want, or if unfortunate things happen, we're like, well, fuck this, and we feel let down, we feel betrayed. And I can speak to myself here. I can raise my own thing. So I'm curious if that is something that you see, and because you work with a lot, I would say it's much more explicit, the work you do with folks. It incorporates more of a spiritual element. But how much of that, my relationship with spirit is so I can get something, how much of that is prevalent in your world?
I think it's important to name that, what's prevalent in my world is a different question than what I work with, because I work with people where they're at. So there's plenty of people that I have worked with that do have that kind of, I'll just call it programming, like that they have that in them, that kind of framework in them of, if I'm a good girl, or if I, cross my T's or dot my I's, or if I say my prayers or whatever, then I'll be rewarded in some way. Mm-hmm. But that's their orientation. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily mine. So,
and I want to be this is such a nuanced conversation, because I think living from a place of virtue means our lives will be, I do believe that living with virtue and care for ourselves and others does mean that we invite more good fortune towards us, but I don't think it protects us from crazy shit happening or unfortunate shit happening that's outside of our control. And I think that there's an aspect of this, which is I'm trying to control the outcomes of things that are really outside of my control. And if I can appease or work with the spiritual or kind of unseen system, then I can get what I want. That's the thing I'm trying to point to. It's very nuanced.
Well, I think it does make sense. And I think we should just start. The first place we need to start is just kind of like having a shared, just almost like a shared map of what you're bringing here. So, map. Well, what I mean by that is that you're speaking essentially of transactional experiences with religion or spirituality, like how that can become transactional and reductionist, like that reduces it. That reduces the whole experience to like, what do I get? This is fair. This isn't fair.
If I do this, then I get this.
If this, then that. So I think it's really important to just name that we're talking about right now. You're bringing the concept of that, just the transactional nature, that can happen.
And the concern I have.
And the thing that I want to name, the other thing that I think is important is that there are positive attributes of that. There are benefits to that. And there are drawbacks to that. And you're speaking to both of those a little bit. Okay. So I think that's important to speak to. And it's because there's a lot of, not all, but there's a lot out there that has elements of transactional engagement. And there's a lot out there that doesn't, but then gets reduced to transactional elements of engagement. For example, like karma being taken out of a larger philosophical framework that it's embedded in. Like I often hear it, like I'm just socially at parties or whatever. It's like, oh, well, karma, or like, oh, well, if I do that, I got to watch my karma. Like people will use it in a really simplified way. So I just think it's important to let's just start there. Like there's going to be benefit. There's positive influence and negative influence of what we're talking about.
Yeah. Okay. And I think I want to speak to my concern, and this comes more from what I've experienced, but also what I can see in others, which is if the transactional way of being doesn't work out, or we get disappointed or we get let down, or like you realize there's no Santa Claus kind of a thing, then the baby goes out with the bathwater. The whole thing gets thrown out. And then I believe we are robbed of something really beautiful. Yeah. And when I talk to people, I'm like, yes, I'm wanting to live a life that's more meaningful and more purposeful. Yeah. And it's like, and you've robbed yourself. Right. You've now separated yourself from everything. You've kind of isolated yourself internally.
Right.
There's one belief in this squishy thing between your ears that says, I'm separate from everything. And, and there's this, anyway. So I just see a lot of suffering there. That was true for me for a long time. And I want to speak to this because I think if I follow it down, a lot of it comes down to like, I did the transactional thing and it didn't work out the way I wanted it to. So fuck it. It's out. Like I don't buy into any of the rest of it. So I just want to what if that wasn't the only way?
Yeah.
If the transactional thing works for you, great. You're a multi-level marketer and you pray every day that you get new leads and it works out. Fantastic for you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But, if it's not working out for you, maybe there's a way that there's another option here for you.
I think the other thing that you're speaking to that's really valuable that is kind of I personally think that there's two sort of fundamental things that are happening in the human experience when we talk about like how they orient towards religion or spirituality, or
they being a person,
how humans orient. I think fundamentally there's attachment issues that show up. I was going to say that. And then the other thing for me is control, like power and control. So there's.
So if I'm not familiar with attachment, how would you describe? Not in the Buddhist sense that I have an attachment to the way things should be, but you're.
I'm talking about like when we're babies, when we're born, let's just say, 18 months of life, 2 years of life, somewhere in there. Everybody has needs, food, touch, and movement. It's quite simple. As a baby, you need to be fed, you need to be rocked, and, whatever. You need to be chained, you need to poop, that sort of thing.
You're completely dependent upon.
Yeah, you're dependent upon, and your caregiver at that age, when you're that young, your caregiver is basically God. Like it can translate as we grow those initial experiences of, did my needs get met? In an infant stage, when our needs get met, it essentially translates to the core message of the world is okay. The world is an okay and trustable place to be. My caregiver is an okay and trustable. People are trustable, right? And so, thank you, Dewey Freeman and Eric Erickson, all that. But as we grow, that core messages can continue to exist in our view, our basic sort of the lens that we look through. So if we have secure attachment, if we've had our needs met more or less in those first crucial years of needing to have needs met, then we kind of come out with like, all right, I trust that my needs can get met. And people are okay. Generally, they're like trustable, and
challenges in life
challenges,
happens, but
like the world's generally an okay place to be. It's not an unsafe, scary, awful place that might kill me, or I might die the more I engage in relationship or the world in any way. So I think there's a fundamental attachment that happens in terms of how did you experience those first years of life by your caregivers? What was the core message that happened there? I think it's valuable to keep in mind that may be part of the lens that people look through when it comes to, as they grow, when it comes to their needs getting met in big uncertain ways, like when they're facing groundlessness, if there's a big environmental disaster or something really tragic that happens that really shakes the ground that we stand on, or our sense of like our feeling of like, is the world an okay place to be? Are we okay here? I think that there's a fundamental, I just think that that's one of the fundamental kind of things that happens. So the other thing is control. So,
well, hold on just before you make, because I think I like that you brought that in, because the attachment stuff really impacts how we enter into relationships with others, especially our intimate relationships.
Yeah, other world.
We're always repeating whatever didn't get, we're always trying to close that loop, and it's a very complex. So it also makes sense that we might project this onto source, spirit, God, whatever the word is that you like. And so, we could have that kind of weird if our attachment stuff is a little skewed or damaged or however or impaired in some way,
Right.
we would look through that lens and
Yeah.
see spirit through that lens.
That's right, including needs getting met. So there's a real basic, I mean, like respect, like no bias, no judgment. Like there's a real basic piece here around like I have needs. Like think about like more primitive or third world countries. Like there's a saying that Daniel Four says. I really appreciate it. It may not be that he coined the phrase, but it says, "Need drives the ritual." And so you think about from a very just straightforward, basic place. If you are a tribe that's like you're an agricultural tribe, and your whole community subsides on your crops being successful, you better fucking believe that they're going to be praying. You're going to be praying for rain. You're going to be doing rain dances. You're going to be making offerings to the field spirits, the air, the water, the whatever, whoever,
right.
The Brigid, the generativity, Artemis, like whoever, like
sacrifice a goat.
There may be sacrifices. Those are offerings. And so there's a real genuine, and I think there's a place is what I'm trying to say is like, there can be a place for transactional, appeasing, the attempt of like, hey, I have a need that needs to be met. I want to be in relationship with you. And the shadow side can look one way, but it's really
something.
Like, yeah, how can I be in relationship here? Because we need to be in relationship here. Like this is serious. Like we're going to die.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's a place for that. And I also think that there's, like that fundamental, like what is the lens that we look through?
Mm-hmm.
Is it a need that needs to be met? Is it a relationship, like a bond that we want to form and we want to feel secure in? Is there do we have a sense of like, can we settle into the unknowingness, the unknown and the awe and the wonder, or do we need to? Does that not feel safe? And so all through the attachment lens, it just helps us remember we're human. I think the human side of things, our brains, and
is the control thing next, or is that the transactional thing was the control?
When I say like, as humans, there are two kind of factors that I'm always kind of holding and like, what's happening with this person? For me, it's like looking at their attachment stuff and also looking at like what's their relationship with power and control. Mm-hmm. And so, because as you said, like there are many upsides of the transactional way of doing things, but there's a lot of downsides too, which is what you're speaking to. You talked about essentially feeling betrayed. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's a relationship where you seek something and then you get let down and then you feel betrayed. Well, a lot of people, there's sort of a thing around like, there is that betrayal. There's also that feeling of like, it's me. What am I doing wrong? They turn it on themselves, but there's also that mistrust of like, I can't rely on you.
Right.
That's that attachment thing again. So when it comes to something as ginormous as the living universe, that just what we can conceptualize, I think we're dealing with our just groundlessness, straight up. Like we have no fucking clue what we're looking at. Mm-hmm. We try to come to conclusions. We just have no idea. And that's scary.
It's really scary.
Just as life events, Twin Towers, earthquakes, massive floods, where like the hurricane that hit southeastern U.S. like not that long ago, that people were like, what the fuck? This doesn't happen here. Mm-hmm. So big things shake up our sense of, is the world okay? Are we okay? And a really natural response to that is trying to actually control. Okay, well, if I flip the light switch 7 times, then this room is okay. Or if I make 17 prayers every night, or if I make sure to share my food with the spirits of the land, mm-hmm. or if I there can be a sense of, if I do this, then I'll be okay. or like, yeah, we make prayers, or we give money to the church, or we do acts of faith or whatever, so that we will get miracles, so that we will get blessed, so that we will be protected, or whatever it is. So I think that there's value in that in a lot of ways. And I also think that it can, for me, when I work with people, I'm looking at what's the flavor of, like, how is it peppered in power and control for them?
Yeah, and I can appreciate that on one level. I might do certain rituals from a place of trying to get a sense of control and control an outcome, and
which is helpful.
Make an offering to get something in return, and I can appreciate that. And then there's also I could enter a ritual from a place of reverence.
Yeah,
that this is an opportunity to just express my reverence for the unseen and the awe and the wonder and the mystery of it all. I don't want to pathologize the one thing. I think where my judginess comes from is the kind of materialistic aspect of things. Like I'm working a system with the universe, and then I get good parking spaces,
I'll have prosperity, or I'll get that job promotion.
It's
or
still
whatever.
very much kind of rooted in a narcissism of this is about me getting things.
Yes.
Okay.
Like that's current, but as I talked about, like, rain dances and such, it's like, it's for the good of the community, like the survival of the community. It's still it's still rooted in, like, what's in it for us.
Right.
Which is, I don't know for sure, but I may be not correct here, but I think that might be considered like a one-way prayer. Like, I'm just going to talk to you. I'm just going to pray to you. I'm just going to give you these things or ask for these things, versus that two-way prayer of, like, I'm going to talk and then I'm going to listen.
So let's talk about that a bit, because if we were to look at this through kind of like a developmental lens, like there's a young way to look at things. Spirit is Santa Claus essentially, and it's my job to, lay out the cookies and the milk, and I'm going to get the toys that I want. Right? I'm going to be a good kid. I'm going to follow the rules and not get on the naughty list, and I'll leave out the cookies and the milk, and then I get the toys, right? There's that kind of relationship that we can have towards
it's a good analogy.
Gigantic,
I appreciate that.
Thing that's ineffable and incomprehensible.
Yeah.
And then there is kind of switching to, maybe a way to describe that is that I'm not separate from that. That I am an expression of that. And I think that's a shift. Whereas I'm over here, that's over there, and it does its thing to me. Whereas this could be more of a, what if I was here to be an expression of that in some way? I'm still me, but my life can be more of an expression of this ineffable source. And I'm curious, and that then it becomes a bit more of about a surrender and a relaxing of who do I need to be, and important and significant and those types of things, and just, well, maybe I listen more. And I think that's where you're starting at a point where the conversation can shift from what can I get to what am I here to give, or what am I here to express. And of course, this can all get hijacked by a gigantic ego. Cult leaders and, mega church pastors and that kind of stuff. But I think that can be a much more rewarding relationship, and understanding that there is a bit of something here for me to express and to show reverence in that way.
This can also be appreciated by atheists, what you're saying. So there can be this, like, the amazingness of humanity, of what is what is like the capacity of an oak tree, just as much as my own capacity and potential to really realize in this lifetime. That doesn't have to be linked to religion or spirituality. And it very well could be also, like, I am that. I am divine. The divine is in me. I am of the divine. I am from the divine. So I like That is a fundamentally different position, I think, to or perspective. But I like that there's more room. I personally have a bias because I like there's more room there.
I do too, and there's remembrance here. You reminded me of that word, like, but it's a remembering. Like I'm reattaching myself to the larger, to the whole, instead of as before, it's me, my needs, my identity, and I'm separate. It's me against the universe.
Right.
And I'm in this relationship with the universe to get my needs met.
Yes.
Now I'm part of it.
Yes.
I'm no longer isolated or separate from it. And that I can start to see that I am also an expression of this too. Whether I believe in the mystery and the source and the unseen stuff, but nonetheless, there is an expression here. There is a growth in a thing that's happening.
Totally. And I think that there's a lot of intersectionality between that and like our relationship with nature, like eco-spirituality. Like it doesn't have to be spiritual, but a lot of people feel spiritual when they're in nature. Like they just have these moments of like kind of these big awe-filled moments or deep moments of feeling deeply embedded and connected with all things, and even just like hanging out, like going camping. Like, wow, the wind and the leaves and the trees and the water and I feel my own blood is like humming along in the symphony of all the things. And so there's just there can be a real experience of belonging and like not feeling that separateness that you talked about.
Until there's bears. But yes.
Also.
You're like, get the fuck out of here.
But but the cool thing about that is that it does kind of help us back off of the hyper individuated stuff, right? Like
and I want to be clear, like it's not either or. Like it's a both and, that we are who we are as people, as individuals, and there's an essence of who we are. There's a soul that's unique, that is ours. There's a temperament that we have, that we come into this world that's unique, and embracing those things. Yeah. But relaxing the kind of the separation, the castle kind of mode. Like I'm going to wall myself off. And, I love that you brought in the attachment stuff and the other thing, but this, like, I'm just here to get through it and get what I can and then get out. There is you can see that. That drives greed. There's people that are approaching their entire careers from that perspective. What can I get and then get out? Get as much as I can from that guy and then get out. Yeah, and it's like we're kind of looking through life through that lens, which is incredibly isolating and paranoid and just an awful place to live, in my opinion. But I can understand that if I felt really threatened, that's how I would live. Okay.
Yeah.
So if we come back from what can I get and kind of that young Santa Claus, that child before Christmas mentality, and then there's a place where I can be in more reverence and appreciation for the unseen and the incomprehensible. Yeah. And just be blown away. Speaking of which, those epic spaceman videos, I sent one to somebody and I was like, isn't this amazing? He goes, this makes me really uncomfortable. So Epic Spaceman, look him up on YouTube. I really want to get him on the podcast. He does these visualizations of just how huge the universe is. I love it. And it's always his ability to create visualizations but also just kind of blow your mind. Yeah. But I always have this, I'm always left in a state of awe and reverence and wonder, like, oh my gosh, isn't the universe amazing? Yeah. And unbelievable. Like I thought I was starting to grasp what it is. And then he just like, he's like, oh, you're not even close. You're looking at. Right. And this guy was like, oh, this makes me really uncomfortable. And I was like, oh, that would be the small self. Like, oh, I don't like feeling this insignificant. And just completely insignificant. It's so
and also really out of control. Like there's a sense, like there's no sense of like, holy, how do I matter? How do I have any fucking influence or control? Like there's a lot of big things that show up for our existence that get bumps up against that sort of bigness.
Just watch all of those videos.
They're I know. Fantastic. You love him, and I love him too. It was very medicinal during the election to watch his stuff. So. But it that reinforces that, like, this place, like if we look at attachment and then power and control, it's like, wow, if we look at that, it really helps underscore what I said was like, you have no idea what you're looking at.
And that's terrifying.
You can even have a pretty good sense, like a pretty good beat, like you're getting along in life pretty good, and you still have no idea what you're looking at. I just fucking love that. Like that's, for me, if you ask me about me personally, sure, I've like fundamentally more contemplative, more Native American style, like animist, all that stuff, eco spirit, like that's more, the relationship, focusing on responsibility, relationship, all that sort of thing. And my seat is, you have no idea what you're looking at. Like everybody I work with, I'm not saying that to them because that's pejorative to them, but I'm over here. Whoever I work with, like whatever's going on, it actually helps me hold my seat and not get kind of swept up in whatever their, framework that they're wrestling with because nobody has any idea what we're looking at. Yeah. Nobody knows. So, and it's beautiful that way. I mean, it's just inspiring and full of wonder.
And really scary to the small self that needs to have it figured out and wants to have a construct to explain the world. It is terrifying to realize that just doesn't, it can't even begin to hold the reality. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so the invitation here, there's an opportunity and I'll kind of speak to some of the people that I work with, and maybe you can do this too, which is like for a lot of the folks that I work with, they've probably spent quite a bit of time cutting themselves off from the larger mystery and the larger sense, and they've really just focused in on themselves and what they can create and achieve, and there's this there's strong sense of the self-importance that they have, and the more that they've gone down that road, the less happy and the less fulfilled they are. Nonetheless, the small self, the part of them is like, well, we must need more of this. We're not getting enough of this. So they double down and they go further into needing more, stuff or attention or significance or status or things or whatever. And so it's a really nasty spiral that they can get into. And the idea of introducing, hey, what if we shifted your perspective here and helped you recognize that you're part of something much larger, and then tapping into that might relax some of this other stuff of getting, and you might find that there's something else for you in this lifetime. I can't prescribe what that is. I don't know what that is. That's for you to explore and for you to find out on your own. But I found that those that are willing to entertain that and be curious there and find what works for them, that there's a lot more peace. Yeah. And there's a lot more sense of a wholeness. And it doesn't mean that they give up the things that they enjoy doing, but it sits in a larger frame.
Yeah, I hear you saying it shifts like you're essentially talking about shifting the focus. So from that sort of, like you mentioned narcissistic earlier, like from that really hyper individuated self of like, I got to get mine, or I must need more of this so I can be okay. Like that kind of just me, to more like, what am I part of? What am I embedded in? What do and that can also shift. For some people, it can shift kind of a sense of purpose. Like there can be sort of a thing around like, oh, wait, it feels really good to give or help or do acts of kindness
or play
or extend love instead of judginess or hatred or whatever it is, condemning or being supportive instead of condemning. Like that actually feels better to me. So it just shifts the focus a little bit to just enough sometimes for people to then, I think it tends to then bring up bigger questions like what really matters? What is this all for? What do I want to give or leave to my kid? Like what do I want my kids to take away from my behaviors or my actions or my way of being? What do I want the world to, like, do I want the world to be a better place? Do I want to have a part in that happening?
I just think there's something that happens when we take ourselves less seriously. Or believing that our need for XYZ is so serious. Yeah. If we don't take it as seriously, then if we don't believe that there's so much at risk, with that thing. We can be more playful with it. It can become more of a game. And having that larger frame can help us see that, okay, yeah, from the Epic Spaceman video, this is completely insignificant, but that doesn't mean that I'm insignificant, that my life and my experience is insignificant. Right. So how could I be more playful here? Mm-hmm. What would love look like? What would that expression look like if I've got this really tiny amount of time here? How do I want to align my life with that? And that's where creating some discipline around that and not allowing ourselves to get hijacked repeatedly by the small self and the fearful things that we talked about, but to help align ourselves more with that big self and that big perspective can ultimately help us get what we want instead of the castle mentality of once I get this, then I can, then I'll be fine.
I have something to say about what you're saying, but you just said it can ultimately help us get what we want. So what do you say? What do you mean when you say that?
I think there's a belief that, well, if we come back to freedom, aliveness, love, and peace, I'm operating from a place that ultimately we're hoping that if we do the math, that if we get enough money, enough significance, enough security, enough XYZ, and we have a belief that if I do this with my career, or I do this with women, or I do this with men, or I do this with whatever, ultimately I'm hoping to get to a place where I feel free, where I feel alive, where I feel really loved, where I feel connected with people, and I feel at peace. And I bring that up because if they went through all of that shit and they felt the opposite, they felt trapped, they felt drained, they felt isolated or overwhelmed or bored, they'd be like, what the fuck? This isn't what I signed up for. So if we come back to what we ultimately want, I'm pointing in the direction of these types of experiences of freedom, aliveness, love, and peace.
Okay, so a person might think he wants the Ferrari and the big house,
that's the objective
experience
thing.
He's going for is the experience of aliveness or freedom or whatever.
Yeah, it lives in that, and it's different for everybody. But normally I've just found through years, like we're always kind of coming back to those things. And they tend to be the bedrock foundation of the experiences that we're wanting. And so if we understand that we're essentially playing for peace of mind, that we're playing for freedom, aliveness, and love, that it's like, oh, well, there's another route there if I'm willing to relax some of these other things and relax this one theory that my small self is bought into that needs to be the center of my story all the time.
Yeah, and the thing that I want to speak to is that, to just tie it together is, if we're talking about, in my case, in my practice, like a lot of people that I work with, there is a big canyon. There's a big gap between what's going on with their attachment stuff and where they want to be. So the ability to even shift that.
Can you give me an example of what that looks like?
Yeah. Like I don't trust God, or I don't trust that, what if there is something there to support me, or what if there isn't? Either side of that same coin is fucking terrifying for people. Some people, that's terrifying. And that each side of that coin has
for many years, by the way.
For many people.
Yeah.
And each side of that question has kind of a cascade of other terrifying questions.
Yeah.
What if there's not? Okay, if there's not, then what? Or what if there is? Oh shit, then what? Or what does that mean? What are they going to talk to me about? Or who am I to them? And how am I anything towards this magnificent, awe-striking, elevated thing? So there's a lot. It's loaded. Let's just say it's loaded. And so you think about map that to somebody that maybe hasn't had their needs met. The world isn't necessarily a trustable and okay place to be. And then we're trying to talk to somebody about yeah, man, just open your expansive view and just see that you're part of all things. And it's all about freedom and the bigness of all this.
You say that as if you're also holding a joint, by the way.
Well, because I think for them, that's probably how it lands.
Yeah.
Is what the
it feels
fuck
ungrounded.
Are you talking to me about,
right.
Dude? This isn't this is not what I need. It actually creates a barrier to what they actually need. So
it's threatening.
It is threatening. And so I think the thing that I want to speak to, a lot of, I think, and this is really my very own personal theory here. I think people that have have had some of those attachment experiences that aren't so great, adverse experiences, traumatic experiences, needs getting met experiences, or really harsh experiences that have left a negative influence on them. I think there is so much in life, religion, even some spiritual things too, but like there's just so many things that they can live into purposely, consciously, unconsciously, that can support this narrative of like, I'm not gonna, like a narrative that might make them want to be atheist, or a narrative that might make them be like, wow, I really gotta be a good girl in order to have anything good happen to me, or like I gotta do all the things right and be a good person so I don't get cancer. Like there's just so much that can facilitate that kind of system in their brains, that story, that the move towards something beyond that can feel really scary. And that's where I think that there's a really nice place when we talk about the more contemplative, the more nature, like eco-spiritual, animist, like when there's a willingness to shift into the focus of that being a relationship. It could even be being able to be with a sunset without saying, wow, isn't that a pretty sunset? Like you can still feel like it's a really pretty sunset, but what is it? What's the impact on you? What is it if you were just to be with the sunset? And I speak to that because I think that it's the relationship that's actually kind of terrifying. Whether there is a seen thing or not there for them. It's the engaging in that in any kind of way where there really is impact. That's what's scary. And
that would be true with a person too. Like
absolutely.
if they
that's exactly
they
why I'm
felt
speaking to this.
vulnerability and accessibility with other people, they're like, let's just look at our phones. And
this is why I say it all kind of boils down to like relationship with self, relationship with other, or relationship with a larger world. The larger world can be your job or your community. It could be spirit, your religion. It could be anything. Right. But it is all relationship from my perspective. And it is rooted, I think, in attachment and our ability to be in relationship in a reciprocal. Is there reciprocity in a way that is nourishing and supportive to our overall being? Or is it transactional? Is it one way? Is it isolated? Is it individualistic? Is it narcissistic? Like what? So the reason I'm just saying that is because I hear what you're saying in terms of what you know benefits people. And in the work that I do, I think there's often people like that's a big leap. So you have to kind of baby step it through relationship. Like, okay, well, we're in relationship.
Let's see if it's okay.
Let's just see. Yeah. You man, go sit with the trees, man.
Hey,
I know you're laughing.
This tree, man.
Nature has a huge impact on people. If I ask people like in a really hard time in your life when what has been supportive to you, some people will say, oh, a person. But a lot of people will say, I was like traveling at I just climbed this mountain, or I was out in nature and I just felt like everything was okay. Like it's just weird. Like it does.
Yeah,
it just works for people.
I agree. Yeah. I think about the scale of nature and then putting ourselves within that frame. Again, it's like, oh, I'm small here, but I don't need to feel annihilated. And I think that's what our fear is that I'm going to be annihilated. Even if I'm in a intimate relationship with someone else, I could still be annihilated here. I could still be hurt deeply by this person. So if I'm armoring myself there, or I'm armoring myself against the unseen, it makes total sense. And I got a ton of compassion for that.
Yeah.
But if I think kind of coming back here is like, I would want to encourage someone who's listening to this that if they're feeling that emptiness and kind of like, what's this all for? And to look at where we might be armored a bit, look at maybe some of the scripts that we're carrying, that it's this way versus that way, and who knows? Maybe there's another possibility if we felt safer, or we felt more open, and without having to give up something.
Exactly.
In
You don't
return,
have to throw it out.
Right.
What has been working. Like it's that I was just thinking, like this transactional stuff, like it helps with faith, it helps with optimism, it helps with generosity, it helps with our sense of morality and justice and fairness. Like it does help.
Yeah, absolutely.
Help us along. So
yeah. I think it's the looking at what I'm defending here.
Yeah.
And maybe play with that. Just be playful with that. Like, what if I didn't have to? What if there was nothing to lose there? All right.
Cool.
Thank you. I learned a lot from you today.
You did?
I did.
What did you learn?
I had seen your relationship with this and that before, but I didn't get how that fit in with attachment stuff. That was really cool.
Yeah. It's kind of the premise of my whole jam.
Well, yeah, I got the attachment stuff, but I just figured that only fit with
psychology,
intimate relationships.
Not at
with
all.
People. Yeah.
Not at all.
If these interviews are helping you, please leave a positive review on whatever podcast app you use so that others can discover the show more easily.